The bells of Valerius' palace rang out across the capital, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the cobblestone streets and gilded towers. From every corner of the bustling city, people raised their heads, for the bells tolled not in mourning or war, but in proclamation. On this day, the royal herald's voice thundered in the grand plaza. By decree of His Majesty King Aldric, Alpha of the Crown, ruler of all Valerius, 100 Beta princes, the noblest sons of foreign lands, are hereby invited to the great royal ball. There, the king shall choose his destined mate and consort. Excitement surged like wildfire. Merchants shouted, minstrels sang, and young nobles rushed to tailor shops to prepare new silks. For weeks, the city had murmured of nothing but the upcoming ball, the grandest since the coronation. Whispers floated through taverns and tea-houses. Which prince would win the Alpha King's hand? Which kingdom would rise in power once their son was chosen? But deep within the palace's servants' wing, far from the marble halls and golden chandeliers, the news fell upon ears that dared not dream. Elias, an Omega maid with delicate features and downcast eyes, scrubbed a silver goblet until his hands ached. His back bent, his simple linen uniform damp with sweat. He listened as fellow servants gossiped near the kitchens. "Can you imagine?" one footman whispered eagerly. 100 Beta princes, all competing for His Majesty's heart. "As if His Majesty would ever look at the likes of us," another scoffed, tossing a rag aside. Elias lowered his gaze to the goblet in his hands. Through its polished reflection, he saw his own face, pale skin smudged with soot, soft lips pressed tightly together, and eyes filled with a longing he never dared speak aloud. The Alpha King, he thought, the name a secret hymn in his chest. Untouchable, distant, beautiful. He remembered faintly a day long ago when the king had not yet been crowned, when Aldric was merely the crown prince. Elias had been a trembling child, cornered by older boys in the palace courtyard, mocked for his Omega scent. And then, like a storm, young Aldric had appeared, his presence scattering the bullies with nothing but a sharp glare. "You belong here as much as anyone," the prince had said, his voice steady, before walking away without another glance. Elias had held that memory like a candle in the dark all these years, yet he never approached again, never dared to hope. For he was nothing more than a servant Omega, bound to polish silver and sweep marble floors, while the king belonged to jeweled princes and glittering crowns. Still, his heart ached as he heard the others gossip. "The Beta princes will bring gifts. Gold carriages, armies," a maid giggled. "Whoever His Majesty chooses, our kingdom will be tied to another by bond and blood, and then the whole world will envy them." Imagine being chosen by the Alpha King himself. Elias turned away, clutching the goblet to his chest. He whispered to himself, "Unheard. Imagine." Meanwhile, far above in the highest tower of Valerius' palace, King Aldric sat alone before the vast stained-glass window of the council chamber. The late afternoon sun painted his broad shoulders in hues of crimson and gold. His crown rested on the table beside him, heavy with jewels, yet his expression was unreadable, carved in stern composure. Below, the city bustled with excitement at his announcement. The world believed him fortunate, destined to bind his reign with glory through the chosen mate. Yet Aldric's heart was cold with dread. 100 Beta princes would parade themselves before him like exotic wares at market, smiling, bowing, offering charm and alliances. They would see not the man beneath the crown, but the throne itself. None would love him for who he was, only for what he could give. Aldric rose to his feet, his sharp alpha aura pulsing in the empty chamber. His amber eyes narrowed. "I would rather stand alone," he murmured into the silence, "than wed a heart that beats only for power." But duty shackled him, as it always had. The ball would proceed, the princes would come, and he would smile as though his fate was not already sealed. Far below, in the servants' wing, Elias polished until the goblet gleamed like moonlight, unaware that his quiet existence was about to collide with the king's. And when it did, no decree, no crown, no tradition, would remain unshaken. The palace gates had not seen such splendor in a century. From dawn until dusk, the procession of 100 Beta princes thundered through the capital, their jeweled carriages glinting beneath the autumn sun. Horses adorned in silken reins pranced through cobbled streets, while servants unfurled banners embroidered with the crests of foreign kingdoms. The people of Valerius lined the roads, cheering, tossing petals, craning their necks to glimpse the future consort of their king. Each carriage was grander than the last, one plated in silver and ivory, another encrusted with sapphires so bright they caught the eyes of children who gasped and pointed. Some princes came armored, swords at their sides, declaring strength and valor. Others came in brocade and velvet, perfumed, their fingers heavy with rings. Inside the palace, the air was thick with anticipation. Courtiers rushed about arranging gifts in endless rows, bolts of silk, golden statues, rare gems from foreign lands. The servants scurried between kitchens and halls, balancing trays of wine, fruits, and sweets prepared for feasts that would last days. And among them, quiet as a shadow, worked Elias. His role was simple: polish, carry, serve. Yet never had his heart pounded as it did now, as though the palace itself trembled with the footsteps of so many suitors. His linen sleeves were rolled to his elbows, his fingers reddened from constant scrubbing of polished silver. From the doorway of the servants' gallery, he dared to peek into the grand hall where the princes would be received. It was breathtaking. The chandeliers were ablaze with 1,000 candles, scattering light across marble floors that reflected the brilliance like a mirror. The ceilings soared high, painted with scenes of wolves running beneath stars, ancient symbols of Alpha rule. Rows of nobles stood waiting, their silks rustling like the sea. And at the far end of the hall, upon a throne wrought of gold and onyx, sat King Aldric. His presence silenced the air. His posture was proud, his shoulders draped in a mantle of midnight blue trimmed with wolf fur. The crown upon his brow glimmered, but it was his gaze, sharp and amber like molten fire, that commanded all. One by one the princes entered. The first bowed low, presenting a diamond-encrusted chalice. The second offered an ivory harp, said to be strung with angel's hair. The third, Lucian of House Vera, tall and striking in crimson velvet, knelt with a confident smile and kissed the king's hand. "Your Majesty," Lucian purred, his beta aura carefully restrained yet humming with self-assurance. "I bring not only jewels but the strength of my father's armies. Together our kingdoms could be invincible." Murmurs of approval rippled through the hall. Aldric accepted the offering with a neutral nod, his face unreadable. Prince after prince paraded past, bows rehearsed, smiles polished. Their words were honeyed, their eyes bright with ambition. Yet Aldric's expression remained carved of stone. From the gallery, Elias lowered his gaze, ashamed to even look at the king too long. Still, his heart raced at every glimpse. The strong lines of Aldric's jaw, the stern set of his lips, the way his crown seemed a burden as much as a glory. And then, fate slipped its thread. As Elias carried a tray of wine goblets into the hall, his worn shoes caught the hem of his tunic. The tray tilted, crystal goblets rattled, and a splash of red wine spilled onto the marble floor. Gasps rose from nearby nobles. Elias froze, mortified. He fell to his knees at once, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the floor, stammering apologies. Forgive me, my lords." The hall's murmurs sharpened like knives. Some nobles sneered. An Omega servant, clumsy as ever. Does the palace keep no discipline? Before the princes, no less. Elias's cheeks burned, his hands trembled as he gathered the fallen goblets. But then, he felt it. A gaze, heavy as fire, fixed upon him. Slowly, unwillingly, Elias lifted his eyes. Across the vast hall, King Aldric's amber gaze met his. The world stopped. For one endless heartbeat, Elias was no servant, no invisible shadow. He was seen, truly seen. Aldric's eyes lingered, unreadable, before he shifted his attention back to the next prince. The moment broke, but in Elias's chest, something had already changed. He returned to the shadows, his hands still shaking, his lips pressed together to hide the trembling smile that threatened to bloom. He looked at me. Above, on the throne, Aldric's fingers tapped once against the armrest, his expression still impassive to all watching. Yet in the stillness of his mind, one thought lingered stubbornly. Why did I notice him? The first night of the great royal ball dawned like a festival of stars. By dusk, the palace was transformed into a kingdom of light. 1,000 candles burned in crystal chandeliers, their glow spilling across walls draped in velvet banners embroidered with silver wolves. Musicians filled the air with the strains of violins and harps, while perfumed air swirled through corridors, where noblemen whispered in low, hungry voices. The princes had shed their travel cloaks and now glittered like living jewels. Robes of peacock silk, capes edged in gold, masks shaped like foxes, hawks, and lions, each sought to outshine the others. Some laughed with practiced charm, others measured their rivals with cool, assessing glances. The air was thick with competition, like wolves circling the same prey. At the center of it all, seated upon his throne, was King Aldrich. His midnight mantle cascaded over the steps, his crown gleamed under the chandeliers, and yet his presence alone silenced the hall more than any jewel or title could. His amber eyes swept the gathering with calm command, though his expression betrayed no warmth. When the herald announced the beginning of the first dance, the floor came alive. Pairs of men spun across the marble, silk sleeves brushing, jeweled heels clicking in time with the music. One by one, princes approached Aldrich with bows and rehearsed compliments. "Your Majesty, your reign is a beacon across the continent. No jewel shines so bright as your crown. Permit me this dance, and I will show you the loyalty of my kingdom." Aldrich accepted their hands with courtesy, gliding across the floor with perfect poise, but his heart remained unmoved. Their smiles were hollow, their laughter rehearsed, their eyes gleaming not with affection, but with calculation. Every hand that touched his was heavy with expectation. "Choose me. Bind yourself to my power." At the edges of the hall, hidden in the shadows of towering columns, Elias worked silently among the other servants. His tray carried goblets of wine and sugared fruits, yet his gaze strayed often toward the king. He watched as Aldrich danced with prince after prince, watched the way nobles leaned close, whispering promises of armies, wealth, and alliances. Each time, Elias's chest tightened, though he had no right to feel such things. He was only a servant. He was meant to be invisible. And yet, when Aldrich's gaze swept across the room, Elias swore it brushed him for the briefest moment. His heart lurched. He lowered his eyes at once, gripping the tray so tightly his knuckles whitened. The music swelled, dancers spun faster, laughter rang. Yet Aldrich's restlessness grew. With every prince who touched his hand, his patience thinned. Their words blurred together, flattery, promises, ambition. None spoke to him as a man, none dared to see beyond the crown. And then, in a fleeting pause between dances, his gaze drifted once more, to the shadows by the servants' gallery. There he was, the clumsy Omega maid from earlier, balancing a tray with trembling hands, his head bowed, his figure small against the towering grandeur of the hall. Aldrich's jaw tightened. He should not have noticed him. And yet he did. The memory of the spilled wine, the way the boy had bowed so low, the flash of startled eyes, fragile but honest. Unlike the endless parade of polished princes, that servant's gaze had not been full of ambition. It had been full of fear, and something more delicate, something Aldrich could not name. "Majesty," purred Prince Lucian at his side, interrupting his thoughts. Lucian's smile was sharp, his crimson velvet catching the candlelight. "If it pleases you, the next dance should be ours. The hall expects it." Aldrich inclined his head. He rose, taking Lucian's offered hand, and once again the floor erupted in admiration as the two men spun together, Alpha and Beta locked in a dazzling display of strength and elegance. The crowd cheered. Nobles whispered that Lucian was the clear favorite. His aura was commanding, his smile confident, his steps perfectly matched to the king's, but Aldrich's mind was elsewhere. His body moved to the music, yet his thoughts lingered at the edge of the hall, where a servant Omega lowered his gaze to hide the flush on his cheeks. And in that moment, Aldrich understood his own restlessness. The princes dazzled the world, yes, but they could not move his heart. No crown, no army, no jeweled gift could stir him half as much as the unguarded tremor in the hands of his poor Omega maid. The ball raged on long after midnight, music and laughter echoing through the marble halls. Yet for all its glittering splendor, King Aldrich felt caged within it. Another prince bowed, another polished compliment, another hand pressing too long against his own. His crown weighed like iron, his smile, forced, grew brittle. When the final dance ended and the princes dispersed to drink and boast among themselves, Aldrich quietly slipped away. Guards bowed as he passed, but none followed. He moved through the palace corridors with steady strides, his mantle trailing behind him like a shadow of midnight. Silence greeted him in the servants' wing. The candle-lit corridors here were narrow, plain, stripped of the grandeur of the ballroom. The air smelled faintly of soap and hearth fire, a quiet world apart from jeweled chandeliers and gilded lies. And there, through the open doorway of the kitchens, he saw him. Elias knelt by the long wooden table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, scrubbing at goblets stacked higher than his head. His soft brown hair clung damply to his forehead, his thin shoulders curved under the weight of exhaustion. The servants who had worked beside him earlier were gone. Only he remained, silent and tireless. Aldrich paused at the doorway. His presence should have been thunderous, an alpha king entering the room. Yet Elias was so focused on his task, he did not notice until Aldrich spoke. "You work while the rest of the palace celebrates." Elias startled violently, nearly dropping the goblet he held. He scrambled to his feet, bowing so deeply that his breath caught. Majesty!" His voice shook. "Forgive me, I did not see. Rise." Aldrich's tone was quiet, yet commanding enough that Elias obeyed at once, though his head remained lowered. His hands twisted nervously at his apron, knuckles white. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Only the faint crackle of the hearth and the distant echo of music reached them. Finally, Aldrich spoke, his amber eyes studying the boy before him. "Why are you here alone?" Elias swallowed hard. "It is my duty, sire. The goblets must be cleaned for tomorrow's banquet. There are others who could do it. I volunteered." His voice was soft, almost swallowed by the firelight. "It is easier this way. No one notices me." Aldrich's brow furrowed faintly. "No one notices me." The words lingered. In a hall where 100 princes fought to catch his eye, this Omega wished only to disappear. The king stepped closer. Elias stiffened, his Omega instincts tightening like a bowstring at the sheer force of the alpha aura that accompanied him. Aldrich noticed, the tremor in his breath, the quickened heartbeat. He softened his voice. "Tell me your name." Elias, Majesty." Aldrich repeated it slowly, as though tasting the syllables. "Elias." The Omega's breath caught. No one of his station expected a king to remember, much less speak, their name. For a moment, Aldrich simply looked at him. Looked, not as a king to a servant, but as a man seeing another. His hands, raw from scrubbing, his soft lips bitten from nerves, his eyes lowered as though he dared not meet a gaze too bright. "You said no one notices you," Aldrich murmured, "and yet, I find I cannot look away." Elias's head snapped up, eyes wide, a flush spread across his pale cheeks, blooming like dawn. He stumbled for words, but none came. His chest rose and fell too quickly, as though the air itself had grown heavy. The king's gaze lingered a moment longer, then he turned toward the doorway. "Rest now, Elias. Tomorrow the ball begins anew. Do not hide yourself away." And with that, he left, his mantle vanishing into the corridor's shadows, his footsteps fading until only silence remained. Elias stood frozen, the name of the king echoing in his mind like a secret vow. His heart pounded so hard he pressed a hand against his chest, afraid the sound might betray him even in emptiness. He spoke to me. He saw me. For the first time in his life, the Omega maid allowed himself a fragile, trembling smile. And, in another wing of the palace, Aldrich lay awake long into the night, haunted not by the faces of 100 princes, but by the memory of a servant's startled eyes beneath the glow of firelight. The great royal ball stretched on for nights. Each evening, the marble halls glittered with candlelight, music thundered, and 100 princes displayed, their charms like peacocks fanning their jeweled feathers. And each night, King Aldrich danced, dined, and listened, with the patience of a man chained to duty. But his thoughts strayed elsewhere. It began innocently. A glimpse of Elias in the garden tending to the lanterns before dusk, a sighting of him in the library, arms full of linens, eyes lowered as nobles swept past without so much as a glance. Aldrich told himself he was merely observing. After all, a king must know his palace, his servants. Yet his eyes sought the Omega unbidden. His steps carried him down corridors where he had no business. And every time, he found himself pausing, watching Elias as though the boy carried some quiet gravity no court prince could rival. On the 4th night of the ball, Aldrich left the ballroom after the 3rd dance, claiming fatigue. The nobles murmured, but none dared protest. Instead of retiring to his chambers, however, he wandered into the moonlit gardens. There, under the flowering arches, he found Elias. The Omega was kneeling by a fountain, scrubbing its stone rim with a brush. His thin figure was bathed in silver light, his sleeves rolled back, his hair glinting faintly. He hummed softly to himself, unaware of being watched. For a moment, Aldrich only stood there listening. The melody was fragile, like something woven from the night air itself. When Elias finally noticed him, he jolted upright, nearly stumbling into the fountain. Majesty! His bow was hurried, clumsy, his voice hushed with alarm. Aldrich stepped closer, his boots silent on the stone path. Do you sing often? Elias's lips parted in surprise. Only when I'm alone, sire. Forgive me if it disturbed. It did not disturb. The king's voice was low, steady. It soothed. The Omega's cheeks warmed under the moonlight. He lowered his gaze, clutching the brush in his hand, as if it might shield him from the weight of those amber eyes. Aldrich studied him. No jeweled prince had spoken words that lingered in his chest, yet this servant, with his trembling voice and soft song, stirred something dangerous. Walk with me, Aldrich said suddenly. Elias froze. Sire, That was not a request. And so Elias obeyed, following at the king's side along the lantern-lit path. The garden smelled of roses and night-blooming jasmine, the fountain's trickle soft against the distant echo of music from the hall. After several steps in silence, Aldrich spoke again. Do you know why I find these nights intolerable? Elias hesitated. Because of the princes. A faint huff of laughter escaped the king, quiet but real. You are not wrong. His hands clasped behind his back, his gaze sharp on the gravel path. They smile at me with perfect teeth, bow with perfect grace, speak with perfect words. And yet not one of them has looked at me and seen anything but a crown. Elias's throat tightened. He dared a glance upward. The king's profile was stark and beautiful in the moonlight, strong jaw, proud nose, eyes that carried both fire and loneliness. You are more than a crown, Majesty, Elias whispered before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air like a forbidden prayer. His heart lurched in terror. Fool, what have you said? But Aldrich turned to him, and in his eyes flickered something Elias had never seen before, a raw softness, fleeting yet undeniable. You speak as if you know me, Aldrich murmured. Elias lowered his gaze quickly. Forgive me. I meant no. I do not seek your forgiveness, the king interrupted. I seek your truth. The Omega trembled, fingers curling against his apron. Truth. His truth was that his heart had belonged to the king since childhood, since that single moment of kindness in a courtyard years ago. But how could a servant dare speak such words? The silence stretched, thick with unspoken longing. Finally, Aldrich stepped closer. His presence wrapped around Elias like a storm, alpha aura, warm and suffocating, yet his hand, when it lifted, did not touch. It only hovered, just above Elias's cheek, as if held back by restraint. Do not hide from me, Elias, the king said softly, his voice low as thunder rolling in the distance. I see you. The Omega's breath caught, his eyes wide, his body trembling under the weight of being seen, not as a servant, not as an Omega, but as himself. And then, as though the moment itself frightened him, Aldrich stepped back. His hand fell to his side, his expression smoothing into its usual mask of authority. Return to your duties, he said, voice quieter now. But remember, when the ball ends each night, the crown does not follow me here. Elias bowed, his heart hammering so violently he thought it might break. When he rose, the king was already walking away, his figure swallowed by moonlight and shadow. Only when Elias was alone again did he let himself collapse onto the fountain's edge, his trembling hands pressed to his lips. He sees me. And in his chamber that night, Aldrich lay awake once more, not haunted by the princes, but by the trembling honesty in a servant's voice. You are more than a crown. By the 6th night of the ball, the palace glittered brighter than ever. The halls overflowed with laughter and music. The wine flowed without end, and the princes doubled their efforts to win the Alpha King's hand. And yet, beneath the surface, a different music stirred, the low murmur of suspicion. Have you noticed? Whispered a lady in waiting to her companion as they watched the floor. His Majesty grows restless. Restless? The other raised a brow, fanning herself with an ivory feather. He leaves the ball earlier each night, and when he dances, his smile, it never reaches his eyes. Similar whispers carried through the crowd of courtiers, fluttering like moths in candlelight. None dared speak openly, but all saw the same thing. The king's gaze did not linger on the princes who dazzled the hall. Prince Lucian noticed most of all. From the very beginning, he had been the front-runner, his aura refined, his lineage impeccable, his confidence He had assumed the crown was within his grasp, and yet night after night, Aldric's amber eyes seemed to drift, not to him, nor to any rival prince, but to something beyond the floor. Lucian's smile remained polished, his laughter smooth, but inside his mind sharpened like a blade. Something distracts him, something he hides. The truth revealed itself in fragments. A servant girl claimed she had seen His Majesty in the kitchens late one night. A guard muttered that the king had walked the gardens without escort. Another swore he glimpsed the shadow of a servant at the king's side beneath the arches. And though no names were spoken, suspicion began to coil. Meanwhile, Elias lived in a fragile balance between bliss and terror. Each day he performed his duties as though nothing had changed, polishing silver, carrying trays, sweeping halls. Yet in the quiet corners of the palace, he met the king in passing, a brush of eyes in the corridor, a fleeting word in the garden, a stolen moment in the library when Aldric asked about the poem Elias held in trembling hands. Those moments were small, but to Elias, they were everything. Still, he knew the danger. His heart pounded whenever another servant glanced his way too long. He avoided the princes, kept his head bowed, and prayed no one noticed how often his eyes strayed toward the throne. But the court was a nest of hawks, and hawks. On the 7th night, as Aldric danced with yet another jeweled suitor, Lucian lingered near the edge of the floor, wineglass in hand. His eyes were sharp, watching not the king's movements but where his gaze wandered, and there, just beyond the servants' gallery, stood Elias, tray in hand, head bowed. It was subtle, almost nothing, the brief flicker of Aldric's eyes toward that shadow in the corner. But Lucian saw it. A slow, knowing smile curved his lips. Later, when the music quieted and Aldric excused himself early, Lucian followed at a distance. He watched as the king's path bent, not toward his chambers, but toward the quiet wing of the palace. Lucian did not need to see more. His suspicions were confirmed. So when he returned to the hall, his voice was honeyed as he spoke to the nearest prince. "Have you heard?" he whispered, just loud enough. "The king tires of noble company. Perhaps he seeks entertainment elsewhere. Perhaps even among the servants." The words spread quickly, whispered from one noble to another, feeding the growing fire of scandal. Some laughed it off as impossible, others furrowed brows in concern, but none could ignore the scent of intrigue. By the time Aldric returned the next day to the ball, the air was sharper, the smiles of the princes tighter, the bows stiffer, and Elias, though he did not know why, felt more eyes on him than ever before. The ballroom shone brighter than ever that evening, as though the chandeliers themselves were aware of the gathering tension and sought to drown it with light. Gold glimmered against silk, jewels caught the candle fire, and the air was thick with perfumes that clung like honey. Yet beneath the brilliance lay a sharp edge. The princes smiled, but their eyes flickered too quickly to Aldric's face, searching, measuring, doubting. Their laughter was louder than before, forced, as though to conceal the unease spreading like ink in water. The whispers had grown teeth, and Prince Lucian sharpened them. He floated through the crowd with practiced ease, his lips curving in gentle amusement as he dropped seeds of suspicion wherever he went. "Strange, isn't it, that His Majesty departs so swiftly these nights? Some say he has unusual company." No names were spoken, but eyes were already turning toward the servants, who moved like shadows against the glittering floor. Elias felt the weight of those eyes. As he poured wine for a visiting duke, his hand trembled slightly. He bowed lower than usual when offering fruit, hoping to disappear into the folds of his apron. But he could feel it, the way nobles' gazes lingered, as though they were trying to peel back his skin, searching for secrets. "Stay calm," he told himself. "You are no one, a servant, invisible." But it was too late for invisibility. The king's gaze had touched him too many times. When the music swelled for the grand waltz, Lucian stepped forward in perfect timing. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly, bowing low, "it would honor me if you allowed me this dance." Aldric gave a nod, expression unreadable. The floor parted for them as they took the center. Lucian was a flawless dancer, his movements elegant, his smile perfectly polished. To any onlooker it seemed like nothing more than two sovereigns locked in a graceful duel of charm. But Lucien's words, spoken just for Aldrich's ears, were knives sheathed in silk. "Your Majesty grows distracted," he murmured as they turned. "Tell me, is it one of us who stirs your thoughts, or someone far humbler?" Amber eyes flashed, but Aldrich's expression remained carved in stone. Lucien's smile widened. "Ah, I see. So the rumors hold truth." From the servants' gallery, Elias watched, his chest tight. He did not hear the words, but he saw the way Lucien leaned in too close, saw the faint tightening of Aldrich's jaw. Something dangerous was brewing. And then Lucien struck. As the waltz ended, he swept into a deep bow, but instead of releasing Aldrich's hand, he straightened and raised his voice just enough to carry across the hall. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," he said smoothly, "but it seems to me that no noble suitor will satisfy your heart. Perhaps the truth is that your eyes seek elsewhere, perhaps among those who serve at your feet." The hall fell silent. Every jeweled head turned toward the servants lining the wall, and in that frozen moment, Elias felt 100 eyes pierce straight through him. Aldrich's voice cut through the silence, calm but heavy as steel. "Prince Lucien," he said, withdrawing his hand, "you speak boldly for one who claims to know the king's heart." Lucien bowed again, but the gleam in his eyes was triumphant. He had not exposed the secret fully, but the seed was now rooted in every noble mind. As Aldrich returned to his throne, Elias kept his gaze fixed on the marble floor, heart hammering, praying he would not be named, but he knew, with cold certainty, that his safety had just shattered. The palace lay cloaked in silence. The laughter and music of the ball had faded into the night, leaving only the hush of wind across marble courtyards and the soft drip of distant fountains. But Aldrich could not sleep. Lucien's words still rang in his ears, heavy with venom. The nobles had seen the truth in his eyes, perhaps not the whole truth, but enough. His secret could no longer remain untouched. And yet, he did not regret it. He left his chambers, his steps soundless, the guards bowing but not daring to question him. His path led him not toward the royal wing, nor the council chambers, but the servants' quarters at the far edge of the palace. Elias sat alone on a narrow bench beneath an archway, the moonlight catching on his pale hair. He had shed his apron, though his hands still bore faint traces of the day's labor. His chest felt hollow. The moment Lucien had spoken, Elias had known. The fragile safety he had clung to was gone. Every glance in the hall had branded him. Perhaps it was only a matter of time before someone spoke his name aloud. A soft voice broke the stillness. "Elias." His head snapped up, and there, framed in silver moonlight, stood the Alpha King himself. "Your Majesty," Elias stammered, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched his knees. "Forgive me, I should not." "Rise." Aldrich's voice was gentle, yet commanding. "I did not come here as your king tonight." Elias lifted his head slowly, breath catching at the sight of Aldrich's amber eyes, glowing faintly even in the dark. For a long moment neither spoke. The air between them vibrated with the unspoken truth that had bound them these past nights. Finally, Aldrich stepped forward, closing the distance, his hand lifting, hesitating just before brushing Elias's cheek. "You must think me reckless," Aldrich murmured, "to risk everything for these stolen moments." Elias trembled beneath that touch. "I think you are too kind, too bold, and His words faltered, his heart hammering. "I am afraid, Your Majesty." Aldrich's thumb traced the line of his jaw, tender. "So am I." The confession hung in the air. And then, slowly, Aldrich bent closer, his breath warm against Elias's lips. He paused, as though granting Elias the chance to pull away. But Elias did not. His eyes fluttered closed, his lips parting in wordless permission. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, reverent, like the brush of a prayer. Elias gasped against it, his hands clenching at the folds of his tunic. Aldrich deepened it, the faint growl of longing vibrating in his chest, as though the alpha within him recognized its mate at last. When their lips broke apart, Elias's cheeks burned scarlet. He had never felt so small, so cherished, so utterly undone. "My heart," Aldrich whispered, his forehead resting against Elias's, "has never been moved by a crown, nor a throne, nor 100 princes in all their splendor. Only by you." Elias's breath shuddered. "But if they find out, let them." Aldrich's voice was fierce, his hand cradling Elias's face. I would defy them all before I deny what is." The night passed in stolen embraces beneath the arches, their words a mixture of fear and yearning, of promises neither knew if they could keep. For the first time, Elias allowed himself to lean into Aldrich's warmth, to believe, if only for a fleeting heartbeat, that he was wanted not as a servant, not as a pawn, but as himself. And when Aldrich finally left, fading into the corridors of marble and moonlight, Elias pressed trembling fingers to his lips, knowing that his life had changed forever. The palace slept. Only the guards kept vigil, their footsteps echoing faintly in distant corridors. But deep within the shadowed library, a fire burned low, casting gold and amber light across shelves of forgotten tomes. And in that hush, Aldrich and Elias stood too close. The night before had left them both restless. Their kiss haunted Elias's lips, while Aldrich's wolf stirred within him, restless and unsatisfied, demanding more than fleeting touches. Elias. Aldrich's voice was low, edged with need. If you ask me to leave, I will, but if you let me stay. His gaze burned, unguarded. I cannot promise restraint. Elias's pulse raced. He should have pulled away. He should have begged the king to protect himself, to protect them both, but instead, his trembling hands reached for the folds of Aldrich's cloak, clutching it tightly. Stay, he whispered. That single word shattered every restraint. Aldrich's mouth descended on his, no longer hesitant but searing. Their kiss was a storm, hungry, consuming. Elias gasped as strong hands framed his waist, lifting him effortlessly onto the edge of a broad oak table. Scrolls tumbled to the floor as Aldrich pressed forward, claiming the space between them. Mine! The king growled against Elias's throat, lips trailing fire down the fragile line of his skin. You are mine. Elias's breath broke into soft whimpers, his head tilting back, offering more. Heat bloomed beneath every place Aldrich's mouth touched, his scent overwhelming, his dominance curling around Elias like chains of silk. But when Aldrich paused, amber eyes searching his, there was vulnerability beneath the hunger. Tell me to stop, he murmured, voice ragged. Elias's lips parted, then closed. He swallowed, cheeks aflame, before whispering, Don't stop, please, don't. The king's control snapped. His hands slid lower, pulling Elias flush against him. Cloth became an obstacle, discarded in feverish haste. Elias clung to his shoulders, every nerve alight, his body yielding under the alpha's touch. The difference in their strength thrilled and frightened him. How easily Aldrich could bend him, yet how carefully he handled him, as though Elias were the most precious thing he had ever held. The scent of desire thickened the air. Aldrich's lips traced down Elias's chest, his tongue drawing helpless moans that echoed through the cavernous library. Elias arched under him, his omega nature betraying every hidden craving he had tried so long to bury. You fit against me, Aldrich whispered, kissing the soft hollow of his stomach. Perfectly, as if you were made for me. Aldrich. Elias's voice cracked, torn between shame and aching need. Say it, the king commanded softly, his lips brushing sensitive skin. Say you want this. I want you. Elias gasped, nails digging into Aldrich's shoulders. Please! The plea unraveled him completely. The world outside ceased to exist. In that hidden chamber of books and firelight, king and servant surrendered to instinct, to hunger, to the bond neither crown nor court could sever. Each kiss was deeper, each touch bolder, until Elias cried out, overwhelmed, claimed, and cherished all at once. And when it was over, when Elias lay trembling against his chest, Aldrich pressed a kiss to his damp temple and whispered fiercely, No matter what comes, no matter who dares stand against us, you are mine. The first rays of dawn touched the palace roofs with pale gold. Yet in the library, the fire still burned low, its embers glowing faintly around two figures entwined on the broad oak table. Elias stirred first. His body ached, a delicious soreness that made heat rise to his cheeks. He lay against Aldrich's chest, listening to the steady thrum of the Alpha King's heart beneath his ear. For a moment, he almost forgot where they were, that beyond the carved doors of the library waited a court eager to tear them apart. Good morning, Aldrich's voice rumbled, husky from the night. Elias flushed, ducking his face against the king's throat. It's not morning yet. We should not linger. Strong arms tightened around him. I will not release you just because the sun rises. Aldrich tilted his chin, forcing Elias to meet the fire of his amber eyes. "You are mine, Elias, whether in shadow or daylight." The words made Elias shiver. It was not just possession, it was vow, claim, bond. His body still hummed with the memory of the night's passion, his Omega instincts basking in the Alpha's protection. And yet, fear prickled at the edges. "What if someone finds out?" Elias whispered, voice fragile. "Prince Lucien, he already suspects." The others whisper. "If they knew, if they saw, then let them," Aldrich growled, lips brushing his ear. "I am the king. I will choose my mate as I please. But I am only your servant." Elias's voice cracked. "You are my heart." Aldrich silenced him with a searing kiss, one that left Elias dizzy and pliant. And no throne, no crown, no 100 princes will change that. Unbeknownst to them, a pair of eyes had seen too much. From the crack of the library's half-opened door, a shadow lingered, one of Lucien's attendants who had followed Aldrich's steps when he left the royal wing. The servant's lips curved into a knowing smirk as he slipped silently away, eager to deliver his master the scandal he had craved. By midday, the ball resumed in all its grandeur. Music once again filled the palace, the princes decked in silver and gold, their laughter sharp as glass. But something in the air had changed. Smiles were too stiff, glances too sly. Lucien stood at the center, polished and radiant, a goblet of wine in his hand. His eyes glimmered like a predator's. The king entered late, Elias following discreetly behind with a tray of goblets. And in that moment, Lucien's smirk deepened. Later, when the crowd parted for another dance, Aldrich's gaze flicked toward Elias. A subtle glance, nothing more. But it was enough to ignite the room with whispers. Lucien's voice carried just loud enough to cut through the music. "How strange," he said silkily, addressing the nearest cluster of princes. "The king looks not to us but to his maid. Tell me, is this ball for royalty or for servants?" The laughter that followed was low, poisonous. Elias froze, tray trembling in his hands. His throat tightened as every head seemed to turn. He could feel the noose tightening, ready to choke them both. But then Aldrich stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice a weapon. "Careful, Prince Lucien," he said, amber eyes blazing. "You tread a dangerous line." Lucien only bowed, his smile venom sweet. "Forgive me, your majesty. I merely speak what all already see." That night, Aldrich sought Elias again, not only with hunger, but with desperation. Their kisses were hotter, fiercer, every caress edged with the knowledge that the world was closing in on them. Elias yielded, his body trembling beneath the king's hands, torn between terror and aching need. And as Aldrich claimed him once more, he whispered against his lips, "Let the court rage, let Lucien scheme. I will burn kingdoms before I let them take you from me." The king's chambers were silent except for the crackle of the fire. Heavy velvet curtains drowned out the world beyond, leaving only shadows and warmth. Elias stood by the door, trembling. He had been summoned not as a servant tonight, but as something far more dangerous, far more precious. Aldrich stood before him, stripped of the armor of ceremony, his broad shoulders outlined by firelight. The air between them burned hotter than flame. "Come to me," the Alpha commanded softly. Elias's feet moved before his mind caught up, drawn forward as though bound by invisible chains. When he reached Aldrich, strong hands seized his wrists, not with force, but with reverence, as if testing how much Elias would allow. "Do you fear me?" Aldrich murmured, his lips brushing Elias's temple. "Yes," Elias whispered, his voice cracked. "But I crave you more." That was all the king needed. Their mouths collided, a kiss searing and urgent, tasting of danger and devotion. Aldrich lifted Elias effortlessly, carrying him to the bed draped in furs. The Omega gasped as he was laid down, his thin servant's garb already loosening beneath the Alpha's deft hands. "Look at you," Aldrich growled, amber eyes devouring every revealed inch of pale skin. "So beautiful it maddens me." Elias flushed, trying to cover himself, but Aldrich caught his hands and pinned them above his head, lips trailing down his throat in a fiery path. "A king should not take a servant," Elias whispered through ragged breaths. "It is forbidden." "And yet here you are beneath me," Aldrich murmured against his collarbone, teeth grazing, drawing a gasp. "And here I am, unable to stop." The firelight danced over them as Aldrich worshipped every inch of Elias's body, his kisses slow and hungry, his tongue tasting every place that drew the Omega's desperate sounds. Elias writhed, overwhelmed, his Omega instincts flooding him with submission and yearning. "Tell me," Aldrich commanded, voice dark silk, "whose you are." "Yours," Elias gasped, arching under his touch. "I'm yours, your majesty." "Not majesty." Aldrich's growl vibrated against his skin, his lips brushed Elias's ear, hot and possessive. "Say my name." "Aldrich." The sound of it undone on Elias's tongue shattered the last of the king's restraint. The rest of the night blurred into heat and motion. Clothes discarded, limbs tangled, whispers turned to cries muffled against furs. Aldrich's strength enveloped Elias completely, yet every thrust, every caress was tempered with tenderness, as though Elias were treasure, not conquest. Elias clung to him, nails raking across his back, body yielding helplessly to every demanding claim. He was lost in sensation, in the intoxicating mix of pain and pleasure, in the undeniable truth that he had been made for this alpha, and this alpha alone. When release finally shattered them both, Elias collapsed against Aldrich's chest, trembling, marked in ways no crown could erase. Aldrich held him close, lips pressing into his hair, voice low and fervent. "No court, no kingdom, no rival prince," he whispered, still breathless. "They may try to tear us apart, Elias, but I swear you belong to me and I to you. Let the world burn if it must." Elias, dazed and flushed, buried his face against the king's chest. For the first time, despite the danger, he felt something he had never known before. Safe. The night stretched long, but neither man found sleep. Elias lay tangled in furs, his body sore, his skin still tingling from every place Aldrich had touched him. His chest rose and fell too quickly, as though he had run a great distance. Yet every time his lashes fluttered shut, he felt the weight of amber eyes watching him. "Why do you look at me so?" Elias whispered, flushed. "Because I cannot believe you are real," Aldrich murmured. He leaned down, his lips brushing the curve of Elias's shoulder, lingering there as though to taste the proof of his existence. "You haunt me even when you are in my arms." Elias shivered, torn between shyness and a strange, intoxicating pride that the Alpha King, the man 100 princes sought, looked at him this way. "I am not meant for you," he said softly. "I am only a servant." Aldrich's hand slid down his side, slow and possessive, making Elias arch involuntarily. "You are not a servant here," the king growled against his throat. "Here you are mine, only mine." Aldrich's lips claimed his again, this kiss softer than the searing hunger before, but no less consuming. He guided Elias onto his back, their bodies molding together, skin against skin. This time, his movements were slow, deliberate, worshipful. Every touch was a vow, every kiss a promise. Elias whimpered beneath the steady rhythm, clutching at Aldrich's broad shoulders, his body opening with trust he never knew he could give. "Look at me," Aldrich commanded gently, cupping Elias's jaw as he moved within him. "Do not hide from me, Elias. Not tonight." Elias obeyed, meeting those burning eyes through tears of pleasure. What he saw there stole his breath, not just hunger, not just power, but devotion, fierce, unshakable devotion. Their rhythm grew, Elias's soft cries swallowed by the Alpha's mouth, as Aldrich kissed him again and again, claiming not only his body, but his very soul. The bed creaked beneath their tangled forms, the firelight painting their skin in bronze and gold. When Elias reached the edge, Aldrich's hand intertwined with his, their fingers locking tight. Together, the king murmured, voice breaking with his own restraint. "We fall together." And they did, consumed by heat, by rapture, by the raw inevitability of their bond. After, Aldrich gathered him close, wrapping the furs around them both. Elias lay trembling against his chest, marked, exhausted, but warm in a way he had never known. "You belong to me," Aldrich whispered into his hair, "not as my servant, not as my secret, as my mate." Elias's breath hitched. The word mate was sacred, binding, dangerous. "If you claim me so," Elias whispered, voice hoarse with emotion, "then there is no turning back." Aldrich tilted his chin, forcing him to look up once more. "I never intend to turn back," and with that vow he kissed him again, gentle but unyielding. as though sealing a bond no court or crown could undo. Morning light bled into the great palace, gilding the marble corridors with a deceptive peace. Yet beneath the splendor, whispers spread like fire through dry grass. The 100 Beta princes had gathered once more, their silken garments glittering with gems, their eyes sharp with envy and calculation. Last night's ball had left a bitter taste among them. The Alpha King had smiled at none of them. He had danced with none. His gaze had been absent, his mind elsewhere, and they had noticed. Lucian, the shrewd Beta prince from the Northern Duchy, let his lips curl into a knowing smirk as he stood among the courtiers. "Tell me," he murmured to the cluster of nobles near him, "did any of you see His Majesty after the feast?" There was a murmur of confusion. "He vanished," one answered. "Yes," Lucian drawled, eyes gleaming like a hawk's. "Vanished. With someone unworthy of such royal absence." The suggestion hung in the air like poison. Meanwhile, in the king's private chambers, Elias hurried to gather his things, heart pounding with guilt. His skin still bore faint traces of Aldrich's touch, marks he tried to cover, though his trembling hands betrayed him. "You must not be seen leaving here at dawn," Elias whispered, avoiding Aldrich's eyes. "If they discover." "They will discover nothing," Aldrich said firmly, fastening his cloak as though preparing for battle. His gaze softened as it fell upon Elias, who looked far too fragile against the grandeur of the room. "I will not allow them to take you from me. But your throne—" "My throne is meaningless without you beside it," Aldrich interrupted. His words were resolute, but even he knew the danger. 100 rival heirs, each ready to seize any weakness. By mid-morning, the throne hall echoed with the blare of horns. Courtiers filled the marble space, silken velvet rustling like restless waves. Aldrich ascended his dais with the ease of a king, but his expression was carved in stone. Lucian stepped forward, bowing low before speaking. "Your Majesty, there are whispers that disturb the peace of this court." Aldrich's eyes narrowed. "Speak them." Lucian rose, his voice clear, deliberate, designed to ensnare every ear present. "The princes gathered here came to honor you, to court you, to win the hand of the Alpha King himself. Yet some say you dishonor this sacred tradition by consorting with a servant." The hall gasped as though the words were daggers. Elias, hidden in the shadows at the edge of the hall, froze. His heart crashed against his ribs. Aldrich did not flinch. He leaned forward on his throne, voice low but thunderous in its command. "Careful, Lucian. You tread the edge of treason." Lucian smirked faintly. "And yet, if the whispers are true, would it not be treason to your people, your Majesty, to deny them a noble mate for an Omega maid?" The word Omega landed like a curse. Gasps spread, venomous whispers rising in a tide. Elias's knees weakened. He knew, in that instant, that the world was beginning to turn against them. But then Aldrich stood, towering, magnificent, his amber eyes burning with a dangerous vow. "If you seek proof," he declared, his voice echoing through the vaulted hall, "then hear it from my own mouth. The one I choose is mine alone to name." His gaze flickered briefly, just briefly, toward Elias in the shadows, and the court erupted. The throne hall was a storm of whispers, silk rustling like restless waves, jeweled princes exchanging glances sharp as blades. The words Omega and maid hissed through the crowd, dripping with scorn. Lucian's lips curved, confident he had planted a poison too deadly for the king to swallow. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly, "our kingdoms look to you for strength. How will it appear if you reject every noble offering their hand, for one so lowborn?" Aldrich's gaze swept over the assembly, cold and golden as a wolf's in the dark. "Do you presume to instruct your king on matters of the heart?" A few nobles flinched, yet others straightened, emboldened by Lucian's challenge. The realm deserves a proper consort, one prince from the Western Isles dared to add. A union that strengthens alliances, not... His eyes slid to the shadows, to where Elias hid behind a column, pale and trembling. A scandal. Elias's breath caught. He wanted to vanish, to melt into the marble itself. But the king's gaze, steady as iron, flicked toward him, just for a heartbeat, and anchored him. Aldrich descended the steps of the dais, each stride slow, deliberate, making the crowd part before him. The air crackled with the force of his presence. "You speak of alliances," Aldrich said, voice deep as thunder. "You speak of thrones, crowns, treaties. But I am Alpha King. What is a throne? if it is not mine to command? What is a crown if I may not wear it as I please?" His words struck like arrows, each syllable taut with power. Lucian's smile faltered for the first time. "Then you admit it," he pressed. "The rumors are true." Aldrich paused, golden eyes narrowing. "I admit nothing. But hear this. I will choose my consort when I decide, not when vultures circle my crown." The court trembled, uncertain. Some murmured approval, others outrage. The 100 princes shifted, their ambitions quivering in the balance. And then, turning sharply, Aldrich's cloak flaring, he addressed his guards. "See that the halls remain secure. No one enters my wing without my command." It was a command meant for Elias's safety, though none but the Omega understood it. His heart fluttered with a mix of relief and dread. Later, in the shadowed corridors of the royal wing, Aldrich caught Elias by the wrist and pulled him into a secluded chamber. "You must be more careful," Elias whispered, fear bleeding through his voice. "Every eye was upon you. And let them look," Aldrich growled softly, pressing Elias against the wall, his forehead against his. "Let them choke on their whispers. I will not hide you." Elias's lips parted, trembling. "But if they discover—" "They already suspect," Aldrich interrupted, cupping his face. "Now I will turn suspicion into silence. No one will dare touch you, Elias, not while I breathe." For a moment, the storm of court politics fell away, leaving only the press of their bodies, the heat of their breath, the desperate truth in Aldrich's words. Elias closed his eyes, torn between fear and the dizzying pull of his king's devotion. "Then we stand together," he whispered. "Always," Aldrich vowed. And outside that chamber, the court plotted. Feast glittered with gold and venom. Chandeliers blazed above the long tables where 100 beta princes sat, their jeweled sleeves gleaming as richly as their ambitions. The hall smelled of roasted venison, honeyed wine, and danger. Elias moved quietly along the edge of the chamber, tray in hand, the role of a servant binding him like invisible chains. Every step was agony, for Lucian's eyes followed him with predatory delight. The northern prince rose suddenly, goblet lifted high. "Your Majesty," he declared, his voice silken, carrying across the hall. "We have waited with patience. We have danced, feasted, and bowed, yet still no consort is named." The princes murmured agreement, the sound swelling like a wave. Lucian's smile sharpened. "Shall I reveal why?" Gasps rippled. He turned suddenly, hand shooting out, snatching Elias's wrist as he passed. The tray clattered to the floor, goblets shattering, wine spreading like spilled blood. "Because the Alpha King has already chosen," Lucian cried triumphantly, dragging Elias into the center of the hall. "Chosen a maid, an Omega, to warm his bed." The court erupted, voices shrieking in outrage and scandal. Elias's cheeks burned with shame, his body trembling as he struggled in Lucian's grip. But before the humiliation could deepen, the hall thundered with a roar. "Enough!" Aldrich rose from his throne like a storm, his golden eyes blazing. In 3 strides he descended, seizing Elias back into his arms with a strength that dared any man to oppose him. "This Omega," Aldrich declared, voice carrying like thunder through the vaulted chamber, "is not my servant. He is my chosen, my bond, my mate." The hall fell to stunned silence. Even Lucian's smugness faltered, his hand shaking as he withdrew it. Gasps, outrage, disbelief, yet none dared speak when Aldrich's aura flared, primal and absolute. "You came here to win a crown," Aldrich said coldly, gaze sweeping the princes, "but I am the crown. And the one who stands beside me shall be Elias, my Omega mate. Question it, and you question my throne." His arms tightened around Elias, who stood wide-eyed, trembling, yet held close as if he were the very heart of the kingdom. The court knelt, unwilling, bitter, but powerless. For the Alpha King had spoken, and nothing could unmake the bond he had claimed before them all. The court's silence after Aldrich's declaration stretched long and taut, broken only by the trembling breath of Elias in his arms. Lucian's face twisted, his composure cracking at last. "You disgrace the throne," he spat, daring to rise against the king. "An Omega maid? You would throw away alliances, armies, power, for him?" The audacity sent a ripple of shock through the hall. No one had ever spoken so boldly to the Alpha King. Aldrich's eyes narrowed dangerously. He released Elias gently to the guard's protection and strode forward, towering over Lucian. You dare to speak of disgrace when you would drag an innocent before the court like a criminal? Lucian straightened his shoulders, desperate, defiant. The realm will never accept. The realm will kneel where I command. Aldrich cut him off, his voice like steel. And you, Lucian, will kneel first. He did not raise his hand, yet his alpha aura crashed over the hall like a wave. Princes bent under its force, courtiers gasped and cowered. Lucian resisted, shaking with the effort, but at last fell to his knees, face white with fury and humiliation. Remove him, Aldrich ordered coldly. He will return to his northern duchy stripped of titles, his name erased from my court. Let him rot in the shadow of his own ambition. The guards seized Lucian, dragging him away as his protests dissolved into echoing rage. When the doors slammed shut, Aldrich turned back, and the hall was silent once more. He lifted Elias's trembling hand in his own and raised it high. This is the hand I choose, Aldrich declared, his voice carrying like a vow carved into stone. This is the bond I honor. Let all who would challenge it remember. Your king does not bow. There was no applause, no cheers, only hushed acquiescence, the weight of inevitability. The princes lowered their gazes, ambitions crushed beneath the Alpha King's will. But Elias looked up at him with eyes shimmering with tears, awe, and something far deeper, trust. Weeks later, the palace had grown strangely quiet. The princes had departed, returning to their kingdoms with whispers heavy in their mouths. Some would conspire, others would fume, but none could unmake the vow spoken in the throne hall. In the king's private garden, beneath lanterns that swayed in the evening breeze, Elias walked hand in hand with Aldrich. No trays in his grip, no servant's garb on his back, only silks befitting a royal mate. You still look at me as though I dream, Elias murmured softly. Aldrich smiled, faintly brushing his thumb over Elias's knuckles. And you still doubt I would choose you, when I have already chosen you before all the world. Elias's cheeks warmed, his gaze falling to the roses at their feet. I was nothing. No, Aldrich corrected gently, tilting his chin up. You were everything I searched for. Among 100 princes, among 1,000 jeweled masks, only you saw me as more than a crown. Only you saw the man. The words undid Elias. His breath hitched, and he leaned into the king's embrace, into the kiss that sealed their bond anew under the lantern light. And when dawn came, the kingdom woke to its future, an Alpha King who ruled with fire, and the Omega he had lifted from shadows to stand at his side, not as a servant, not as a scandal, but as his mate, his consort, his heart's true crown. Seasons turned, and with them, the palace changed. What once echoed with rival princes and sharp whispers now bloomed with laughter, softer and sweeter than any song. Elias lay in the royal chambers, sunlight spilling through the high windows, gilding the silken sheets. His body was round with the fullness of life, his hand resting tenderly over the gentle swell of his belly. The court had scoffed at first, doubted, whispered, but those voices had long since fallen silent. For the Alpha King's will was iron, and his devotion to his Omega consort was undeniable. Aldrich entered quietly, though his presence always filled a room. His eyes softened instantly at the sight before him. He crossed the chamber, kneeling beside the bed, pressing his lips reverently to Elias's stomach. Our little one grows strong, he murmured, voice low with awe. I can already feel their spirit. Elias smiled through a haze of tenderness, fingers weaving into the king's golden hair. They will be stubborn, he teased gently, like their father. And loved, Aldrich added, lifting his gaze to meet Elias's. Like their mother. Months later, the palace bells rang not for war, not for scandal, but for joy. In the arms of the Alpha King lay a child swaddled in silk, tiny fists curled, soft cries breaking the hush of gathered nobles. The babe bore Aldrich's golden eyes, but when Elias reached out, the little one stilled, comforted by the scent of his Omega mother. The court could only bow, struck silent by the sight of their king, once feared, once untouchable, cradling his mate and their heir with a tenderness that eclipsed any crown. This, Aldrich proclaimed, his voice steady as he held his family for all to see, is the future of our kingdom, born not of politics, nor of ambition, but of love. Let it be known, strength is nothing without the heart to guide it. Elias, weary but radiant, leaned against him, their child safe between them, and for the first time, the kingdom saw not scandal nor defiance, but destiny. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Kindly comment below if you loved it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.